Anyways, happy 4th of July to all my American cousins. Got your Betsy Ross flag up there. Oh, get out of your way there. There it is. Okay. Ho ho. Anyways, let's have a seat. All right. And I'll stop the music from going any further. Thank you. Oh, let's take this pistol out. All right. And by the way, did you know that tomahawks were standard equipment for Revolutionary soldiers? And you got your single-shot musket here, pistol, and you got your flintlock musket here. Now, I want to show you something. Check it out for your 4th of July sparks. There we go. I'll just set this down here. Trust me, I had no powder in it. I'll put this over here before I hurt myself. Okay, what a great day it is. Anyways, and I hope all of you are having a wonderful celebratory day and maintaining your freedoms. Do yourself a favor. Read your Constitution. Then read your Bill of Rights. Then see what's happening in your country, and maybe you'll act upon it. Anyways, today is Chapter 5 in the book reading of ABAJAM Chronicles. But before I read Chapter 5, I had somebody assess my book, a professional editor. He's a friend, but he's also very unbiased, and I paid him some money, and he went over my book. And this is what he had to say. Now, this is a private, personal correspondence between me and him. And so obviously, I'm not going to read you the whole thing. But starts off, "Hey, Alfie, I won't waste this note telling you I think you're smart and a good writer, and you tell great yarns." Now, that's the first sentence. That's a good way to open up a story. Now, for those of you who are politically correct, you can turn it off right now because you won't want to hear the rest of this. First, and just to get this out of the way, the Indian stuff could cause you no end of headaches. I'm not sure it's cultural appropriation, which personally I don't believe in, and neither do I, by the way. But the language of your book is as politically incorrect as a Third Reich sergeant singing the Horst Wessel song at a synagogue. I love that analogy. If the theme of the book were getting back in time and learning from the original inhabitants, that would help minimize the political incorrectness of the book. But I don't know if that matters to you. And no, it doesn't. And even though you might be historically accurate in all your descriptions, I know enough about publishing that your approach might work mightily in your disfavor. Is this, as they say, really the hill you as an author want to die on? Bring it on! In other words, yeah, okay? It's like I don't bow knee to anybody who says, well, you can't write that. If I offend a certain segment of society, sucks to be them, okay? At my age, I'm my own boss. I am my own man. I only answer to two persons in my life. That's to my God and, of course, to myself. And everybody else, they don't like it, so be it, or be damned. Now, getting back to his letter. The ABAJAM Chronicles did not bore me. It never lost me, I was never confused, and I liked all the characters. The ABAJAM Chronicles leaves the reader hopeful and satisfied and entertained. I'd say that's about enough of the letter to read to you. Okay, so anyways, that gives you an idea of what somebody thinks of my first book and my second book. So now let's get to the reading. I've had a very busy day myself. Did a laundry, got my dinner ready, got the dinner ready for the missus. Went shopping today at Walmart, good old American store. That everything comes from China. Other than that, I'm having a great day. And of course, I didn't work today, so it's good on me. So, hold on. Oh, my. Let's get back. Bookmark was in chapter 6. Yeah. Now, the mystery of the fireball. Jason, Steve, and I are all in agreement the time was approximately 10:45 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Now, we have 3 dots. With both you boys crowding the passenger window at the time, I couldn't see my side mirrors to attempt a safe maneuver. I was attempting to avoid the possibility of getting hit, assuming we were in its path, whatever it was. ... Hell, I've watched enough Nova and Discovery programs over the years since then to now know any kind of impact in our immediate proximity, especially by a large meteorite, would have proven disastrous to us. My only option was to drive over to the left side of the road as far as possible and hope to God we didn't meet any oncoming traffic. In hindsight, oncoming traffic would have been the least of our concerns. Again, he starts to drift off into his other world, 3 dots. There was a slight grade and right bend in the road up ahead. From what I could determine, the embankment on that side of the road didn't appear to be all that steep. I quickly geared down and brought my rig to a rolling stop, partially on the opposing lane's small, soft gravel shoulder. Instinctively, I switched on my emergency flashers, deciding to leave all my lights on as well. Even before we came to a complete stop, that fireball, or whatever it was, streaking on that sharp northwest descent and collision course directly towards us, abruptly changed course. Suddenly, Jason broke in, we now know why that fiery object regained altitude, looped around back towards the east, then headed west in our direction again. Only this time its descent was much steeper. You and I are all too familiar with the significance of that kind of sharp descent in an aircraft, he reminded me. ... I was back again, I think. I doubted they even realized I'd left. So where was I? Oh, yeah, at least you and I walked away from that crash, I replied, still somewhat shaken. The reference to our almost fatal plane crash several years earlier clearly jolted me out of my altered consciousness. Up till now, I was drifting in and out intermittently, like the wipers on my truck during a torrential summer thunderstorm in Georgia. Still having a pair of wings attached to the fuselage and the ability to glide saved our asses, even if we didn't have a lake to crash into, he noted. And not too many people survive water crashes, Dad. ... Drifted back out, or in. Without even realizing it, I had drifted off into another equally vivid vision, finding myself sitting alongside Jason in our rented Katana and flying over Kitchener. He had recently passed his flight instruction and was now qualified to take up passengers. It was in early November, back in 2003. I don't think I could have felt any prouder of my son on this day, flying 5,000 or 6,000 feet above Kitchener with Bernie and the girls watching below. The sky was relatively clear, cold and crisp. Good thing these planes have heat. Without any warning, a flock of late migrating Canada geese flew right into our flight path. We hit one or two and our propeller shattered. Jason desperately struggled to keep the plane from stalling, attempting to glide it to a nearby cornfield that had recently been harvested. All I could do was whisper a prayer for the both of us, even though I knew the outcome. Right at the very moment of our collision with the goose, the premonition of us having this plane crash flashed into my mind. This premonition was one of several I had experienced that September back in 1996, revealing to me we would crash in a cornfield, yet we would both survive. I also recall the images were completely red. I suspected we were going to bleed some. Nonetheless, knowing the outcome that we will both live doesn't in any way diminish the feeling of terror at our impending crash. The landing, or controlled crash, was anything but controlled. We hit the ground hard, bounced, spun around, and slammed into some kind of fence. Then there was darkness. ... I instantly emerged from the vision of the crash, only to find myself exactly where I had left off previously. I shuddered and shrugged that episode off and returned my thoughts to our main focus of attention. Well, right now we're here to talk about this crash, so let's stay focused, I instructed, feeling a tad guilty. I was getting quite tired after all. Perhaps this was why I kept drifting in and out of those trances. Nonetheless, the screen on my computer indicated I hadn't veered from my objective of documenting our experience of that night, even if I felt considerably disoriented and a little perplexed. Anyway, it was at that moment that I came to the conclusion that this thing was some sort of aircraft. It had to be piloted in order to maneuver like it did, but we all wondered how anybody could have survived that inferno. In the next instant, the burning craft slammed into what must have been a lake somewhere off to our right side. We couldn't see the lake at first, what with the trees, the darkness, and drizzle. No sooner did the object hit the water than it bounced off it and began to skip like a smooth stone, reflecting the fire's glow as it hurled its way directly towards us. Meanwhile, as all this was taking place, we three idiots just sat there transfixed, completely mesmerized by this spectacular event. I estimated that fireball missed us by no more than a couple of 100 yards when it first actually struck the water. Once I regained my senses, I was quick to urge you boys. Once I regained my senses, I was quick to urge you boys to get ready and bail out of the truck on my side. For a moment, I truly feared that burning object tumbling end over end towards us might have actually reached the shore and would plow into us. You were quite hysterical with alarm when you cried out, "What are we going to do if it hits the truck, Dad?" "Hey, I might have been really scared, but I didn't cry," Jason vehemently protested. "Sorry, but both of you cried in your panic during those first few moments. At least neither of you pissed or shit your pants. You'll never know if I did or not because I ended up in the water. Ha ha," I teased, trying to lighten the moment. "Besides, I'll admit I didn't know what to do other than keeping us all together. Now, enough teasing, okay? Let's stick to the job and story at hand." No sooner had I refocused my thoughts than I found myself describing the events to my son and Stevie, who were with me in the present, while I, or my consciousness, was actually experiencing a reenactment of the past in all its vivid detail. So I can be in two places at once. Interesting. ... It was lucky for all of us. I briefly glanced to my left and realized we were sitting on a raised portion of the highway. It seemed I had stopped on a causeway situated between the lake and the passenger side of the truck, and a bog on my side. That embankment was a good 15 feet down behind me. Not an ideal parking spot, but I figured a damn good cover from any potential explosions or shrapnel. Within the same instant of that thought, I instinctively pushed my seat back, while simultaneously collapsing my steering wheel forward to create easy access for escaping the truck. Whether it was fortunate or unfortunate, we weren't able to jump out of the truck. All I could do at that moment was shout, "Everybody, heads down!" Push both of your heads down with my hands and cover yourself with my body. I chanced a quick glance out the window to witness billows of steam and fragments of burning material blasting off that burning fireball each time it tumbled back into the water. Fiery shards and good-sized chunks of fuselage crashed into the trees on the right side of the causeway or got tossed into the surrounding dense bush. Much of the debris, still glowing and trailing smoke, flew over the truck and into the bushes all around us on one side. One small piece even hit and bounced off the side of the trailer. At the time, I couldn't see if there was any damage, but I was willing to wager it must have left a good-sized dent, judging by the dreadful thud and shudder we all felt on impact. That was when I determined it was definitely too dangerous for us to leave the truck's cab for the next little while. I wasn't taking any chances that night, not while the vicinity was being bombarded by burning flying missiles of shrapnel and hot embers. I recollect that burning plane must have bounced off the water half a dozen times before coming to a dead rest on the lake, and not that far from us either. Once I figured it was safe, I abruptly sat up, readjusted the driver's seat, the steering wheel, jammed the truck into gear, cranked the wheels over to the right, and popped the clutch. Excuse me for a second. I'm thinking I should lower the screen a little bit, or the camera. Don't want to obstruct the American flag, though. Anyways, oh yes, I left a drink for myself up here. Oh, okay. One gets thirsty when one's reading. Rum and Coke. Anyways, before I could finish describing and typing the rest of the events, Steve interrupted with a sarcastic remark and completely derailed my train of thought, returning me to the present. "Yeah, me and Jason were both glad you got off us at that time. We couldn't see anything at all while you were lying on top of us. And Dad, don't think we didn't appreciate your noble gesture, but like nothing actually happened. And we missed witnessing the whole damn crash." I needed to stretch, so I stood up, stretched my limbs, and proceeded to walk over to the boys. I went and stood over Jason first and pretended I was about to place my fingers on his head and declared, "What with the module's past effect on our lives, especially on me, perhaps I should attempt to do a mind meld on you guys and see if I can transfer any of that imagery into your thick skulls. Ha ha. Jason defensively brushed my hands aside, and both of them in unison declined my offer with a, "Oh, no thanks, ha ha." I might be mistaken, but I sensed a nervous laugh with their refusal. Had they possibly experienced or sensed in some way, small way, what I was experiencing? No time like the present to find out. So, shall we continue? You both know this is where it gets really interesting. All kidding aside, this is where we really need to join our thoughts. Both of them seemed a little hesitant, if not apprehensive. What I meant and what they thought I meant were probably two different meanings. I was being literal. Jason and Steve moved their chairs closer to my desk, perhaps to get a clearer view of the monitor. I don't know how it happened. I had no sooner eased myself back into my chair, refocused my thoughts, and stared into the monitor at where I had left off when I found myself rapidly drifting back to that very night. ... This time, everything around me melted away. My office, the house, the whole property. Daytime changed into night. The dry warmth of my office was exchanged for the cool dampness of that fateful night, and both Jason and Steve were 13 and 14 respectively again. Was this just merely reanimation? The tractor angrily lurched forward. I hastily drove it back across the highway over to my proper lane, all the while ensuring there was no other traffic coming from either direction. Any headlights' glow would have broken the horizon's darkness long before the actual headlights were seen. I finally brought the unit to a rolling stop, parking it on the flimsy right shoulder, more in line and closer to the approximate position of where the burning plane had come to rest. Usually, along a lake's edge, the shoulders of a causeway and its embankments would be reinforced by large rocks, rather than just gravel alone. I had to risk it anyway. As short a drive as it was, perhaps 30 to 40 yards, I had to be especially careful maneuvering my rig around some of the charred fragments and other obstacles that now littered the road. I parked as close to the wood and cable guardrail as I dared, trying to determine exactly where the plane was resting. Our view of the crash site was hampered due to a combination of fog, darkness, trees, and the increasing billows of steam rising off the lake, all mixing in with the surrounding fog. When the three of us exited the truck, we saw the whole highway and the immediate surrounding area littered with hot, glowing fragments of debris. Some fragments were bobbing and floating below us in the murky, grassy water near the shore. Everywhere there were small fires. Fortunately, tonight's earlier showers and now the resumption of a light drizzle would pretty much inhibit any possibility of a forest fire. Hissing sounds from the drizzle hitting the numerous small fires was becoming more evident all around us, to the point of distraction, even alarm. I left the engine idling with all the lights and four-ways on, in the dim hope of attracting some passerby. Hopefully, someone in the vicinity saw or heard the crash and would come to lend assistance, or at least go for help. My first aid training was both limited and extremely dated. As for the first aid kit on board the truck, it was less than adequate for any real emergency. Fortunately, it didn't take long for the obscuring clouds of steam and accompanying hissing sounds to dissipate under the steady drizzle. My eyes were quickly adjusting to our dark surroundings. I could just barely make out the faint outline of where the wreck was. We were aided somewhat by the burning flotsam, like decorative floating candles in a large pond. Well, whatever that plane was, at least it was no longer burning. I could see it was situated in the water a few 100 feet from the edge of the road, perhaps 100 yards at best. Regrettably, from our vantage point, I could see no sign of life. I cautiously led the boys back to the truck, avoiding the sharp broken pieces of the plane strewn across the road. Jason, you've been with me before when I had to set up emergency flares. I opened up the tractor's side box. You know how to light them. Set them up well to the front and rear of the trailer and watch for any traffic. And be real careful, okay? I handed Steve my long mag flashlight. I kept a more powerful 6-volt lantern because it was supposed to be waterproof. I shoved it under my arm and withdrew a large wrecking bar from the same side box. I turned and shone my lantern towards the object in the lake. The intense beam hit it like a lightsaber. The craft seemed to bob gently in the black as ink water. I could see it more clearly now. One thing was certain. It was definitely some sort of aircraft, but I couldn't make out much else. It was far too dark. Well, boys, I said, Jason, having just rejoined us, I'm going to have to go in and make my way to that plane to see if there are any survivors. What I'm going to need you guys to do is stay by the truck. Call on the CB radio every few minutes and watch for any kind of traffic. If someone comes by and you try to flag them down, be real careful and stay on the side of the road along the shoulder. CB radios out here weren't that much good. This part of the Canadian Shield, not to mention the terrain, was heavy with ore deposits that would affect its range. My truck was scheduled to have our company's new Qualcomm satellite system installed early next week. Supposedly, this system would have enabled me to contact dispatch immediately, regardless of my location. Chances were, if I had it, help would have now been on the way, but right now I didn't have it. Before leaving the boys and venturing down the rocky embankment and into the undesirable waters of the small marshy inlet, I made sure one last time that they both understood my instructions. Dad, are you going to be okay? Jason asked me somewhat rather nervously. You know, that's the second time I've been asked that question tonight. I'll be all right if I know you guys are okay and holding the fort for me. But thanks for asking anyway. I flashed them both a big smile and winked at Stevie. I doubt if he saw it. I cautiously made my way down the causeway's embankment, flashlight turned on to make sure of my footing. This section of the lake was a narrow inlet that extended close to the road. I had to cautiously ease my way down 15 feet of rocky embankment to reach the water. As I got close to the bank's edge, I raised my lantern. To my right was what appeared to be a culvert made of old railway ties. I made my way to the culvert and there removed my boots and socks. I made a cursory survey of the shoreline that lay before me, as well as the surface of the uninviting and probably cold as hell water, judging by the dampness and temperature of the air. All around me were pale, ghostly remains of dead trees, twisted trunks, and a tangle of brush and roots, making it all the more inhospitable. I saw some of the trees that had been struck and splintered by the flying debris. I looked back at the trailer and saw a small dent in the wall. We had been truly lucky. I breathed a heavy sigh of dismay and waded into the water. I really wasn't looking forward to this. My bare feet sank more than ankle deep into the oozing muck. I trudged along, brushing aside layers of water lily leaves from my path. Before long I was half walking, half swimming, still twisting and weaving my way through the tall reeds, rushes, and marshy grass. Gradually I made my way over to the floating, charred wreckage of what I presumed had been once a large plane or small jet. All the while as I waded, then swam, I scanned the placid surface of the dark water, constantly checking for any kind of flotsam, from floating bodies to any kind of dangerous objects. And that rather convenient moment I remembered I had needed a toilet break earlier on. Too much coffee at the Windy Lake restaurant. Well, what the hell? I was in the water anyway. So what's a guy to do when this was the only convenient place and opportunity to have a whiz this side of Timmy's? Or Timmins, I should say. I got Timmy's on my mind. Returning my thoughts to the job at hand, I realized some pieces of flotsam might be partially submerged and not visible to my sight, dark as it was. The hazards were countless. Beaver skin hats are itchy, or raccoon tail hats, I should say, are itchy. Okay. Anyways, the hazards were countless. I made a mental note not to think about it, other than being thankful I had kept my jeans and t-shirt on. I did not want to be startled any more tonight, at least not in that way, not by bumping into some bobbing body unawares. It's not that I haven't seen dead people before. In my job, you can't help but run into the occasional accident. No pun intended. I've held dying women in my arms, cradled dead children, and had to patch up more than my share of injured parties, regardless of my dated and experienced first aid training. Judging by the extent of the damage to the plane, I seriously doubted I'd be rendering those services tonight. Surely no one could have survived that inferno, let alone the impact. Excuse me for a second. In the flash of a thought, I went from treading water in a cold and murky lake at night to sitting back in my own chair in the safe and warm confines of my own office. And yet, I wasn't completely back. It was as if I was caught between two worlds. I desperately looked over at the boys, hoping they could rescue me from this altered mental state, but instead of seeing Jason and Stevie as grown young men, I was witnessing a couple of adolescent boys engaged in conversation back at the site of the crash. What did my dad mean when he said he'd been asked twice if he was okay? Did you actually ask him that? Whoa, Jason. No, that was... Whoa, Jason is suspicious of something. I can see Stevie is feeling a little embarrassed about our conversation in the truck earlier on. Apparently, he must have promised Jason not to broach the subject with me. I guess Jason had confided to him about my episode with mental illness, no doubt in the strictest of confidence. Now he was exposed as someone who couldn't keep a secret. Oops. Man, only girls can't keep secrets. That's why I don't tell my mom everything, because it always gets back to my dad. And I don't tell nothing to my sisters. Telling you was like telling a girl. Ooh, just like a girl, he scolded Stevie. Boy, did Steve squirm at that accusation. Let's see if he can recover from that indignity. I'm also now curious as to what other secrets the boys have hidden from me. I'm rather enjoying this aspect of my altered dimension. Altered dimension. I get to be the proverbial fly on the wall, or the unknown spectator behind a mirrored window. And here I thought this kind of stuff only happened in science fiction. While I was in the water, I had no idea this conversation was being conducted behind my back. Kind of wondering now if the phenomena that's creating this uncanny clairvoyant ability is unique to the boys, or would it be applicable to the others? Why, I'd have the facility, the power to determine if a person had ever lied to me. Wow. It occurred to me, this newfound experience is right up there with the biblical story in the book of Exodus, that of the temple high priest who wore a golden breastplate embedded with 12 colored jewels, which also contained 2 divination stones, the Urim and the Thummim. Seems like teaching Sunday school for a few years has paid off. I'm amazed I can still remember this stuff. If I recollect correctly, these jewels would light up or something when a supplicant was telling the truth or a lie, or there was a dispute about an issue. Kind of like what's happening this moment with my son and Steve. But instead of me wearing some golden breastplate with the Urim and the Thummim jewels, I'd be like having a human truth oracle. I'd be like a living human truth oracle. This is one superpower that definitely was unexpected and unimagined. It occurred to me that, considering our circumstances, I'd go so far as to say this added gift was truly serendipitous. It could come in real handy someday. But for now, I decided to return my attention to the boys. Remember when you explained to me why you guys had to move down south, and you told me about that disease your dad has? You called it seasonal something or other. You know, sad. Well, tonight I was awake while your dad was driving. It was really dark and your dad was really quiet. I guess I got kind of worried by all that stuff you told me about him getting mad and weird. So I asked him about his sad, and he was cool about it. Seriously. Well, so what exactly did my dad say? It was evident he was a little annoyed, but more probably he was just curious as to how I had explained my problem to Steve. I was feeling a little ashamed now because I knew my problem had scared him as well, not all that long ago. He pretty much said what you told me, except for the really bad parts, like when he lost it on the highway and scared all you guys. I'm sorry if you feel bad about it, but I was kind of worried. Yeah, well, next time don't go blabbing your mouth off about that stuff to him. He's okay now, but he's still kind of sensitive about what he did back then. Well, Steve acknowledged he had made a mistake and reassured Jason he wouldn't bring the subject up again. It was comforting to see they resolved the issue in a mature kind of way for young teenagers. It was also encouraging to me to find out Jason had defended me as well as forgiven me. I've been haunted by that guilt for too many years. As I watched them from my detached perspective, I noticed them recommence their attention to some solitary figure, barely visible from my vantage point. Seemingly stationary, treading water, up near the half-submerged wreck of the plane. Oh, obviously that would have been me. No sooner had these words formed in my thoughts, and I found myself cold, wet, and treading water again. I was back where I had left off, so I decided I might as well carry on, not that I wanted to. As I got nearer to the wreck, I could hear the distinctive hiss of cold water as it gently lapped up against some of the sections of the body that still remained hot. Shit! The water was really cold considering it was late August. Now that I think about it, I did have to turn on the heat a tad just before we arrived here. The thermometer did read 66 degrees Fahrenheit outside. What was I thinking? I could get hypothermia trying to rescue people who might already be dead. As I drew close, I could feel some of that radiating heat. The warmth was equally welcome as it was disturbing. I realized I'd have to be extra cautious if I was going to avoid getting burned when I attempted to climb into that. I considered the object before me, that plane or whatever it was. Just then a disturbing thought occurred to me. Jeez, what happens if that sucker starts on fire again or blows up while I'm inside? No answers came forth from out of the darkness. Tonight I would be truly on my own. I turned in the water towards the boys, who were both standing in the headlights of the truck along the roadside. I shone my lantern in their direction to get their attention. It's not that easy treading water with one hand, waving a flashlight in the other, while a heavy crowbar is stuck down your pants, weighing you down. ... Is that a crowbar in your pants? Or are you just glad to see me? I had to laugh to myself as I imagined Mae West asking me that question. Under the circumstances, it might have been considered a bit tactless levity, but I needed funny, not solemnity, right now. Humor can sometimes bolster confidence. I'm hoping. Jason! Stevie! Can you hear me? I shouted at the top of my lungs. Jason's high-pitched voice was the first to respond, with Stevie's following. I hear you, Dad. Can you see anything yet, Mr. Meisner? I'm going to have to go inside the plane. Whatever happens, stay with the truck. Blast the air horn now and then. You might get someone's attention. I think I see some cottages on the south shore, no more than half a mile to my right. Then in a stretched-out sentence, I shouted with all the authority I could muster, Do you understand me? Speaking for the both of them, Jason shouted back, We both understand, Dad. Then in a more discernibly nervous pitch, Jason asked once again, Are you sure you're going to be okay, Dad? You know, that's 3 times I've been asked that question now. I really appreciate all the concern. I bellowed in a rather buoyant tone. I was attempting to dispel any apprehension they might be feeling at the moment. With a modest degree of trepidation, I turned myself back towards the plane and resumed my awkward one-armed breaststroke. Just a few more yards to go now. I aimed my flashlight up onto the floating wreckage, which was partially submerged from what I could see. It seemed to be listing slightly on a right angle. Something else I was able to distinguish as I came to see the plane more clearly. This was no plane or jet that I've ever seen before, either on TV or in any aviation magazines. Not anything I've ever seen on the cover of a Popular Mechanics either. Popular Science, perhaps. And that ends the reading of Chapter 5. Next week we go from a mystery to an omelet. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed that reading. Anyways, I hope all of you, my American friends and followers, subscribers, have a really wonderful July 4th weekend. Be safe, drink responsibly, have fun, and we'll hope to see you next week. In case I meet somebody I don't like out there.